And welcome to Just a Moment. My name is Kristen Harding. Welcome to the show. Today we are going to continue reading the Baron Trump novels. It says Baron Trump and the Last President by Ingersoll Lockwood, and it was, I believe, first published around 1899. So it kind of gives us an idea. You know, here we are in 2025, and this is 1899. 126 years. And you know what I've noticed the most about when I'm reading this book is that the sentences are longer, they're more descriptive, there's more beauty in the words that were chosen. I find that in our current language of texting and emojis and all of that, it seems like some of the beauty of our language has been forgotten. So as we explore this ancient book, I think I can call it ancient. I'm thinking about the fact that my great grandmother was born in, I believe, 1897. And so she would have been 2 years old when this book was being, sent out to the world. And to see what she had seen in her lifetime, she lived long enough to see uh, rockets go into space and radio turn into TV and see movies go from basically silent movies to talkies. It's just amazing to me the things that we may see in our existence. Because, quite frankly, when I was little, we didn't have a color TV, it was all black and white. And now my husband has the biggest, gigantic screen TV I've ever seen in my life in our living room. And the TV that I have in my room, or in our bedroom rather, is bigger than the one I grew up with. It's just crazy. So I love technology and I love seeing what's going to happen, but I also have a admiration, an admiration for the beauty of the language that is used in this book. So as I have mentioned in the description, I have not read this book yet, so we are reading it together. So I'm just going to pop over to the comments here and make sure that if anyone has anything to say, even if it's just hello, you are welcome to do so because we are on chapter 4. And it says how the elder baron lost flesh worrying about the investment of my money. The effect of his anxiety on the rest of the household. Oh, by the way, this is a summary. They're so kind. They give us a summary. Let's see. Anxiety on the rest of the household. I take the matter in hand and devise ways to increase my fortune. I become extremely wealthy. When 8 years of age, I am seized with an uncontrollable desire to visit faraway lands and begin to pack up. The elder baron objects. How I set to work to get his consent. Wild doings of my playfellows. How we stormed the castle, broke up the hawking, ruined the fox hunt, summoned the 10 doctors, and set fire to the neighboring fields. The elder baron grows weary of my doings and consents to let me go. My delight and Bolter's joy. The question which now occupied my father's mind to the exclusion of all other thoughts was how to invest this large sum of money so that upon my attaining my 21st year, I would be provided with a sufficiently large income to live as a baron should, particularly when he belonged to so famous a family as ours. The fact of the matter is, my father permitted this question to prey upon his peace of mind to such an extent that he lost flesh perceptibly, meaning he lost a lot of My mother, too, seeing his lamentable condition, began to fret and worry to such a degree that she likewise became greatly emaciated. With their loss of flesh, naturally their appetites dwindled, and little or no food was provided, or anyway no more than what was sufficient to just satisfy Bulger's and my wants. Whereupon the servants began to lose flesh, both the indoor and the outdoor ones, and in their desperate attempt to keep body and soul together, the horses and the cattle were fed upon short rations, and the consequence was they too soon began to fall away. So it grew to be quite a serious sight to see my poor father and mother reduced to mere skin and bones, driven about the country by mere shadows for coachmen and footmen, and drawn by four horses whose bones fairly rattled under their skins when they were coaxed or beaten into a lazy trot. Bulger and I, Bulger and I retained our plumpness and good spirits. At length I determined to interfere and put speedy end to this deplorable state of affairs. I exacted from the elder Baron a solemn promise that he would follow my directions to the letter and not raise any objections, no matter how wild or unreasonable they might appear to him or to my mother. Then bidding him to partake of some good succulent food, retire early and get a nice long sleep, I saluted him respectfully and said, Baron, until tomorrow morning. I had scarcely finished my breakfast when my door opened and the elder Baron walked into the room. He looked so much refreshed. The color had returned to his cheeks, the gleam to his eye. He was already a different man. Here, gracious sir, I began, handing him a parchment roll, is a list of all the best known almanac makers in our land. Have interviews with them at once and purchase from them the right to furnish weather prognostications for the coming year. The elder baron began to expostulate. Baron, I remarked sternly, raising my hand, a true knight has but one word to give. He was silent and motioned me to continue. I did so as follows. Respected parent, when you have secured this right from each of them, return to me. In a few days my father had accomplished his mission. He entered my room and put into my hands the needful concessions from every noted almanac maker in the land. Again I bade him refresh himself thoroughly, get a good night's rest, and see me in the morning. As Bulger and I were returning from breakfast, the elder baron presented himself at the door of my apartments. He looked strong and well. His face had filled out again, and his step had recovered its old-time elasticity. Again I placed a roll of parchment in his hands and said to him, scatter the contents of that parchment evenly and plentifully throughout each almanac on the pages devoted to the months of November, December, January, and February. He looked at me inquiringly, and his lips began to move. Noble sir, said I, ere a sound had issued from his mouth, in our family knights have always been without fear and without reproach. He bent his lofty form in silence and withdrew. Possibly the reader may have a little curiosity to know the contents of the parchment roll which I placed in the hands of the elder baron on this occasion. If brevity be the soul of wit, it was witty. If a fair round hand be the garb of truth, it was truthful. Be this as it may choose to be, the words which my pen had traced on that parchment roll read as follows. All signs point to an extremely cold winter. Indications are coming. Indications that the coming winter will be the severest for half a century. Forecasts all give the same answer. a winter of exceptional length and bitter coldness. Most skilled prognosticators agree in the prediction of a degree of low temperature rarely reaching in these latitudes. About this time, expect unusual cold. Protect your plants. Now look well to your winter vegetables. Secure them from the extreme frost. Double your supply of winter fuel. Now look for fierce snowstorms. Expect bitter cold weather during all this month. Prepare for most unusual hailstorms. Be on your guard for sudden and penetrating north winds. House cattle warmly for all this month. Beware of deadly blizzards, for they will come with a furious onset. After a few days' absence, my father returned to the manor house. His arrival was duly announced to me by Bulger, to whom I said, "Go, good Bulger, and conduct the Baron to my apartment." Away he bounded with many a sportive leap and bark, and soon returned, ushering in the elder Baron with a joyous manner, so common to him when active in serving me. "I have obeyed thee, my son," murmured the elder Baron with a stately arc in his bending form. "'Tis well," I replied, motioning him to be seated. "And now, honored guide of my childhood's uncertain feet, give heed to my words. Our task is almost done. In a few days the investment of this money, which has occasioned thee so much anxiety, fairly robbing thee of thy heart's service, will be complete, ay, complete, and what is better still, so fortunately invested that thou shalt be enabled to call thyself the father of one of the richest children in the kingdom. Hearken, Baron, go now into the leading markets of the land, and put every fur merchant under written contract to deliver unto thee in early autumn all the pelts, dressed or undressed, or the backs of the owners of which they will guarantee the delivery under their hands and their seals. The words had scarcely fallen from my lips ere the elder Baron had risen from his chair and caught me warmly to his breast, meaning he hugged him. "My son," he cried, as he stroked my protuberant brow, "it is a master stroke. It is worthy of a governor of a province. I long to begin the good work. Permit me to set out this very night." "Wait, Baron," said I, leading him to his chair, and gently constraining him to be seated. "Wait. There is somewhat yet to be said. When thou hast completed the purchase of all of the pelts which are expected to enter the kingdom this year, expend the rest of the money in purchasing all the wood, coal, and peat thou canst find. Not that I would draw profit from the poor man's slender store, but simply to keep others from wronging him by combining against him, as they would surely do upon the first publication of the weather predictions." "Ah, little Baron," exclaimed his father, "how thoughtful! For as thou sayest, we must not lay a burden on the poor man's shoulders." Such was the diligence with which my father carried my plans to completion that in a single month I had bought and sold again the entire product of the fur market, at a small advance, it is true, but a large enough to make me an extremely rich man. It was so gently and skillfully done that no one ever suspected the clever ruse by which I was enabled to acquire riches enough to set out upon my travels, just as my inclination might prompt, and to know that were I to be captured and held for ransom by the most grasping of freebooters, my bankers would have gold enough to ransom me. Upon the completion of my 8th year, I was seized with an uncontrollable desire to enter at once upon the fulfillment of my long cherished plans to visit faraway lands inhabited by strange and curious people. My own home, my own language, my own people wearied me and wore upon me. In my sleep, I paced the deck of staunch vessels, shouted my orders, crowding sail in calm and reefing in threatening weather. I passed my time from morn till night, packing cases with suitable articles for traffic with the savages, so that I might be able to penetrate into interiors never visited by civilized man, and ascend rivers closed since the world began to the white-winged messengers of trade and commerce. But strange to say, my father, urged thereto, possibly by the entreaties of my mother, firmly and resolutely set his face against my project of leaving home. I was beside myself with disappointment. I entreated, I implored, I threatened. For the first time in my life, it pains me even now to make the confession, I was guilty of a certain disrespect to the authors of my being. Bulger, after studying the situation for several days, reached the conclusion that the elder baron was in some way the cause of my unhappiness, and it required at times my sternest command to restrain him from setting his teeth into the calves of the elder baron's legs as he quitted my apartment after some stormy interview. "What," cried I, in tones tremulous with grief, "am I doomed to waste the splendid gifts with which nature has endowed me, shut within the walls of this petty town, whose most boisterous scenes are the brawls of its market-places, whose people never witness a grander pageant than the passing of a royal troop's horse? It must not, it shall not be. Thou hast said thyself that I am no ordinary child to be amused with ball and top, and entertained with picture books." But the elder baron had hardened his heart, and all my pleading was to no purpose. And yet I did not despair of gaining my point in the end. The continual dropping of water finally wore away the rock. Is that really it? And yet I did not despair of gaining my point in the end. Okay. The continual dropping of water finally wore away at the rock. I made up my mind now to move the elder baron to acquiesce in my project of leaving home by resorting to entirely different tactics. Said I to myself, he wishes me to be a child, I'll be one. And forthwith I set about making friends with every mischievous little rogue in the town. Not a single juvenile ne'er-do-well escaped my attentions. The more rampant, active, and tireless his power of mischief, the closer I wrapped him in my affections. From gray dawn to dewy eve, these chums and boon companions of mine flocked about the castle. They worshipped me as their leader and yielded an implicit obedience to my commands, as were I possessed of some mastery over them. The elder baron saw the gathering cloud and bent his head as if to meet the coming storm with better chance of resisting it. Came there a dinner party. The choicest Burgundy was found to have been spirited away, and the bottles filled with common claret. Did the elder baron meet his friends in the field for a trial with the hawks? It was only to discover that they had been so overfed as to sit, as to sit stupidly placid when the hood was removed. Let the cook be told that guests were expected, and that he must be careful to have the little dumplings of his soup extra delicate. To the elder baron's horror, a cherry stone would be found in the center of each little dumpling. One of my coadjutors, no, coadjutors, there we go. One of my coadjutors was venturesome enough to pilfer the elder baron's snuff box and fill it with pepper. The result may be imagined. Another took good care to pour water into all the tinder boxes before the guests called for their pipes. Upon attempting to rise from the table, here and there a cue would be found securely tied to the back of the chair. Okay, that needs some explaining because a cue is the ponytail that men used to wear, and so it would be like tied to the back of his chair so he couldn't get up. Okay. One of my favorite exploits was to station myself on the first landing of the stairway and hold the bridge, like Horatius' cockles of old. My wild band of 2 dozen young barbarians rushing madly up the staircase with screams, yells, and vociferations which would have done credit to any horde of real savages I have ever visited, while I, with my wooden saber, beat down their sticks, occasionally rapping too bold a youngster on the knuckles and sending him bawling to the end of the stairway. To Bulger's infinite amusement, as he always insisted upon taking part in the fray and gloried in my prowess. At last, to my great joy, I noticed that the elder baron showed signs of surrender. Like a prudent general, I ordered an attack all along the line. There was to be a fox hunt the next day. I directed one of my trusted lieutenants to feed the hounds all the raw meat that they could swallow about an hour before the start. 10 others, most fleet-footed and glib-tongued, meaning they were fast and they could charm you, I dispatched to the houses of the 10 leading physicians and surgeons of the town and its immediate neighborhood, with the same message ill, and that greatest haste must be made to come with their medicine chest so that the epidemic might be checked. The 10 doctors galloped into the courtyard at nearly the same moment, only to find the elder baron and his friends gathered on a platform holding a whispered consultation over the strange actions of the hounds. The angry disciples of Galen refused to prescribe for the poor animals and galloped away with their well-filled holsters thumping against their legs. Meanwhile, I had not been idle. To the claws of a score or more of the elder baron's fowls I tied a kind of fusee of my own invention, so inflammable that the slightest friction would cause it to burst into flames, and then I turned it loose in the field and the garden adjoining the family hall. They had been cooped up all summer and were overjoyed at the prospect of a good comfortable scratching time mid the dry leaves and stubble of the open fields. The gamekeepers by this time had succeeded in arousing the hounds somewhat from their stupor. When the cry of "Fire! Fire!" went up, the hunting party hastily dismounted and joined the servants in the mad rush for buckets of water. I was sitting calmly in my apartment, with Bulger by my side, when the alarm was raised. The elder baron at first was inclined to think that although my workmanship was plainly visible in the fabrics of mischief which consisted in overfeeding the hounds and summoning the 10 doctors to the manor house on a wild goose chase, yet breaking out of the fire in the neighboring gardens and fields was really something with which I had nothing to do. The return of a venerable old Dominic rooster, which had been either too feeble or too lazy to explode the fusees attached to his claws, settled the matter, however. The elder baron's mind was now clear as to who had conceived the crime in which his poor fowls had been so unwittingly become the accomplices. That night Bulger and I went to bed with light hearts. The elder baron had at last consented to let us set out on our first journey in quest of strange adventures among the curious people of the faraway lands. And we are on chapter 5. And I'm actually going to take a little break and we'll be back in about 5 minutes.
Looking for breathtaking photography that speaks for itself? Whether it's the raw beauty of nature, the sleek professionalism of corporate imagery, or the infinite wonders of the sky, Donovan Pudoka captures it all. With over 10 years of experience, Donovan's lens doesn't just take pictures, it tells stories. His work is perfect for travel publications, corporate branding, artistic prints, or anyone who appreciates stunning photography. If you need high-quality images that elevate your project, Donovan Pudoka delivers. Have we sparked your interest in Donovan's work? Check it out at matrixminds/Pudoka. My eye promises you, you will not be disappointed.
Welcome to Crystal Cove and Mystic Charms, where magic meets the mundane and the extraordinary becomes everyday. Are you ready to gift yourself with the whispers of ancient power stones? To the feel and hear the echoes of our ancient past? Dive into a world where each pendant tells a story, where rare stones hold secrets known only to the universe itself. At Crystal Cove, our collection isn't just jewelry. It's a gateway to a realm of mysticism and wonder. Let the shimmering opal guide you through twilight dreams, or embrace the fiery energy of the sun with our exquisite amber pendants. Each piece, handcrafted by the hands of a true mystic who understand the language of the earth and the fire of one's heart. At Crystal Cove and Mystic Charms, we believe that every soul deserves to sparkle. Whether you seek solace in the calming embrace of amethyst or wish to dance with the vibrant hues of turquoise, our collection holds the key to unlocking your inner magic if you allow it to be so. Visit us today and discover the pendant that speaks to your soul. Crystal Cove and Mystic Charms, where the beauty of our amazing earthy realm meets the magic of the cosmos.
Hey there, Hunter. Go check out our friends at Colorado Custom Game Calls. They are all about creating a high-quality, custom, unique game calls at an affordable price. They are here for hunters that can't and won't pay upwards of $180 to $200 per game call. They pride themselves on giving their customers the opportunity to not only purchase an affordable and high-quality call, but to customize their game call to their liking. So listen up and go check them out. That's www.coloradocustomgamecalls.com. They got calls for all type of game, and all the game calls can be custom made to your own likeness. That's www.coloradocustomgamecalls.com. Tell them Matthew sent you from the Matrix Minds.
What is up, all my beautiful and gorgeous souls? I am Michelle Espinosa, otherwise known as the Shaman, through the Matrix Mind Media. So tell me, how many times have you wished that you had that special power of prediction? You know, to know what was going to happen before it actually happened and took place. To have some power and control over that situation before things came flying at you out of left field. The thing is, you actually can have that power. You can be aware of what's coming. Tune in to Astrology TV with me for Breaking the Cage every Sunday evening at 10 p.m. Eastern on the Matrix Mind Media. And I will go through the astrology and help put you on the right course and get you back in control of your own life. Love you guys.
This CBD fluid is a whole flower fluid extracted from the cannabis flower. We don't use any heat, butane, or chemicals when we extract, so we get all of the components of the plant. All the CBD, CBG, CBA, all the terpenes, all the flavonoids. This allows our body to absorb at 60 to 90% rather than the average of 6 to 10% absorption you would get with a CBD oil. Because our bodies are made up of mostly water and this is a fluid, it's highly absorbable so that you're getting 500% more nutraceuticals per dose. We also have this available in our CBD spray as well as a muscle rub with all kinds of botanicals. You're going to absolutely love it.
Check it out, Brainiacs. MatrixMinds.live/CBD. CBD I use. Feel free again. Feel alive again.
And We are back. My name is Kristen Harding. The show is Just a Moment, and we are reading the Barron Trump novels and The Last President. And we're already on chapter 5. Can you believe that? Now, this one is a long chapter, so we'll see how much we can get through. It's about 30 pages, and apparently I'm reading about a page and a half every minute, so we'll see what we can do. All right, so the summation. Preparations for my first voyage. The elder baron selects the port from which I am to sail. Description of port No Man's Port. How I escaped its quicksands. Whirlpool and Thor's hammer. Becalmed on the southern seas, I rescue my ship in a wonderful way. Land ho. Something about a beautiful island. I leave my ship and start for the interior. How I fell in with some of the most extraordinary beings. Descriptions of them. They leave me to go and request permission of their chief to present me at his court. How I thought myself attacked by a band of gigantic beings. My strange mistake. They proved to be the same beings I had met the day before. What had caused the transformation? The land of the wind eaters. I am conducted to the court of, oh boy, it's spelled Z-T-Wish, Zitwish. So Zitwish, Zitwish. About more about the curious people. The chief's affection for me, the bursting of the babies. Go Wiz becomes my enemy. I grow thin. Queen Fuyu wants me to marry Princess Pufa. To regain my flesh, I teach the wind eaters to catch fish. Terrible accidents resulting from a fire I had kindled. Go Wiz demands my death. Zitwish Zitwish refuses. The furious brawlers try to slay the chiefs and is himself slain by the Zitwish Zitwish. To avoid the marriage with Pufa, I send Bulger back to the ship and then escape in the night. Too weak to bear the fatigue, I am overtaken. Enmeshed in the nets of the wind eaters and nearly beaten to death, Bulger rescues me. The relief party from my ship come up with me. I reach the coast and after a short rest, sail for home. So there we go. That's the summation. Like I said, it's a long chapter. I'm going to have a little sip of coffee. Because reading is thirsty stuff. All right. I threw myself now heart and soul into the task of making ready for my first voyage. Bulger was not slow to understand what all the hurry-scurry meant. He was delighted at the prospect of a trip to distant lands where life had less monotony about it. By the hour, he would sit and watch me at my labors, and from time to time, to please him, I pointed out articles lying here and there about the room, and bade him fetch them, which he invariably did, with many manifestations of pleasure at being permitted to help his little master. In fact, everybody lent a most kindly hand, so that to my great satisfaction, I was left more time for the study of navigation. My poor mother, the gracious Baroness, would not permit anyone else to mark my clothing. With her own slender white fingers, she worked the crest and initials of my wardrobe. There was a matter which I turned over in my thoughts for several days, to wit, what national garb should I adopt? After a long and mature deliberation, I resolved to attire myself in Oriental dress. I did so for several reasons. It had been a favorite garb of mine. Its picturesque grace appealed to my love of the beautiful, while, on the other hand, its ease and lightness made it very agreeable to one of extreme suppleness of limb, and elasticity of step, while the old manor house was being literally turned topsy-turvy, and everybody from cook to chambermaid set by the ears. The elder Baron was by no means idle. He took good care, among other things, that I was well prepared and well provided with wholesome reading matter, and brought me several books of maxims, precepts, reflections, thoughts, and studies, which he requested me to thrust into the empty corners of my chest. For, he said, and that too with a great show of reason, thou wilt have many idle hours on thy hands in calm weather. It behooves thee to feed thy mind, lest its wonderful development be checked, and thou become as an ordinary child, with no thoughts above games and picture books. My poor mother, the gracious Baroness, added to this stock of good literature by presenting me with a small volume entitled The Straight Road to Good Health, or Everybody His Own Doctor. As to my medicine chest, I gave that my personal supervision, for I was always skilled in the art of reading of all kinds of symptoms, and was gifted with a rare faculty of knowing almost instinctively what remedy to give for a certain ailment, without first experimenting upon the patient by trying one thing after another, as is the custom with most people who pretend to heal sickness. Everything was going well now, and I was in the best of spirits when the elder Baron came to me with a proposal, which for some reason, I can hardly tell why, displeased me, although it would seem that it ought to have had the opposite effect. He proposed to precede me by a week or 10 days to the North Sea, in some port of which I intended to purchase, and fit out a swift, staunch vessel, purchase the vessel himself, give his personal attention to fitting her out, and shipping a crew of picked men. What could I do? If I refused his offer, it would have been tantamount to a confession of distrust on my part. Can he have in mind can he have in mind any project to thwart my scheme? Oh, perish the thought! But I must confess that I did not accept his proffered services without serious misgivings. This sudden anxiety on the part of the elder Baron to hurry my departure after having opposed it so long and so vigorously made me a little uneasy in my mind. Before setting out for the North Sea to purchase a ship for me, the elder Baron entered my apartment and spoke as follows: "Pardon me, little Baron, for interrupting thy labors, for I perceive that thou art deep in the study of navigation." "Speak, Baron," said I, looking up with a mischievous smile. "That right belongs to thee." I have a last request to make," he continued in his usual calm manner. "Nor is it a matter of very great importance. Rather, it is a whim more than aught else. Thou knowest from my lips, and from the perusal of our family chronicles, that we were in ancient time very large landowners, and on the coast of the North Sea. We controlled several ports, were extensively engaged in trade, sending out at least a score of ships in a 12-month. One of the ports of our domain was a famous one, famous for the extraordinary character of its inlet and outlet currents, channel, etc. It was said of this port that it was more dangerous than the open sea, that vessels were rarely safer out of it than in it. I know not much of truth. I know not. I know not how much of truth may be in all this, but I do know that one man, an ancestor of ours, not only sailed into it, but safely out again, For thou must know that the channel by which the vessel gained admission to this port could not be used to leave it again, as the irresistible current always flowed the one way, namely, from the sea into this mysterious basin. To leave it, the bold mariner must trust his bark to another channel, and therein lurked the danger. It would gratify me greatly, little Baron, if thou couldst prove to the world that no matter how difficult other captains once found and now find it to sail out of this port, yet to thee it offered no insurmountable obstacles, and therefore am I to come to ask to see, to ask thee to set sail from this port. It is called, I asked carelessly as I turned to a chart of the North Sea, Port No Man's Port. I like its name, said I. Order my ship to await me there. The elder baron arose and, bending his body with a stately grace, withdrew. I accompanied him to the door and dismissed him with the most respectful obeisance. Port No Man's Port, I answered. Ah, here is the chart. The descriptive text reads as follows. Abandoned for many years, ingress easy, egress so dangerous as to mean fatal injury, if not destruction to the sailing craft, outer channel blocked by a fearful whirlpool and swinging rock called the Thor's Hammer. Inner basin extremely dangerous from constantly shifting sands, closed by the order of the Royal Ministry of Commerce and Marine. Upon finishing the reading of these words, I sprang up and began to pace the floor wildly and half unconsciously. The blood rushed in upon my brain. I was obliged to halt and to cling to the back of the tall oak chair, or I should have staggered and fallen to the ground. Bulger was greatly alarmed and sent up a suppressed howl of grief. I spoke to him as calmly as I could to comfort him. After a few moments, the vertigo passed off and my mind cleared up completely. Nay, it is impossible, I whispered. The elder baron could not be guilty of bad faith to me. Away with such a thought. He errs through thoughtlessness and lack of experience. He little knows the terribly dangerous character of the task he is setting me. To him, the talks of shipwreck and death within Port No Man's Port are but legends of old-time sailor life. He has not the faintest suspicion that his request, by so lately made, exposes his only child, son and heir, to an heir to a princely fortune and honored name, either be engulfed by these shifting sands, sucked down to destruction by this fearful whirlpool, or crushed by a blow from Thor's hammer. And yet, why murmur? It's too late to protest. Already the elder baron had proclaimed to the world that to him this proud piece of news that his son was about to renew the old-time glories of his family. I must do one of two things: face these dangers like a man of cool, calm courage, or condemn myself to a life of dull and listless activity, the magnate of a province and not the hero of two worlds. No, the die is cast. I have said it, and it is as good as done. My ship sails from Port No Man's Port, or this little body feeds its fish that day. Doubtless my eyes brightened and my cheeks took on a glow of crimson hue, for Bulger, who had been listening to my soliloquy with most pained expression on his face, as he vainly tried to get at the meaning of my words, now broke out in a very lively succession of barks, bounding and springing about the room in the wildest merriment. He knew only too well that some terrible struggle had been going on in my mind. Now he realized that all was well. Faithful creature, if he could only tell his love, how he would put all human lovers to blush. As the hour drew near for me to bid adieu to the baronial hall, that good lady, the gracious Baroness, my mother, suddenly thought of 1,001 things which she deemed of the very greatest importance to me. She warned me that I was not to sleep in a draught, nor to partake of freshly baked bread, not to drink cold water while overheated, not to cut my finger-nails too short, not to sleep with my mouth open, not to wear my underclothing longer than 1 week, not to neglect to brush my teeth, not to fail to have my hair cut with the new moon, not to strain my eyes reading by a poor light, not to swallow my food without thoroughly chewing it, not to laugh while I had food in my mouth, not to attempt to stop a sneeze, not to neglect to pare my corns, oh my goodness, not to pick my teeth with a metal point, not to examine the end of my nose without a looking glass. Sorry, I just had to. Looking glass. Let's see, where was it? There we go. All right. Not to eat meat without pepper or vegetables without salt. Not to exert myself after a hearty meal. Not to stand up upon my legs while they are asleep. Not to walk so fast as to get a pain in my side. Not to go to sleep until I had first rested on my right side. Not to fail to take a pill if I saw flashes in the dark. Not to neglect to tie a stocking around my neck in case of throat or a sore throat, etc., etc. When the moment came to take leave of the gracious Baroness, my good mother, I was deeply moved. All the servants and the retainers, from indoors and out, filed in front of me, kissed my hand, and showered blessings upon me. I may say safely that the only being present not moved to tears was Bulger. He was so anxious to get under way that he passed an hour or so racing from the manor house to the carriage and back again in a piteous endeavor to get the whole procession started. And start at last we did. 100 hands waved us a fond farewell. The stately trees that shut in the baronial hall swayed solemnly. I was glad when we rolled out of the courtyard, for I needed rest and quiet. My nerves had been on such a stretch for the last month that a change of scene brought me balm and relaxation. My journey to the North Sea was quiet and uneventful. I found my ship safely anchored in Port No Man's Port, and the elder baron there in charge of her. He introduced me to the sailing master, pressed me in his own loving arms, and with a gracious smile and stately wave of the hand, seated himself in the family coach. His only adieu was, "My son, thy wisdom comes to thee by inheritance. Thou couldst not have acquired it. Therefore, make a noble use of so noble a gift. Farewell." I bent my head in silence. The carriage rolled away. I stood alone. Nay, a true and loving friend was there. He looked up at me with his large, lustrous eyes as if to say, "Don't be sad, little master. No matter who goes, I'll stay by thee forever." Turning to my sailing master, I ordered the ship's launch to be manned, and began at once a survey of the mysterious port in which my ship lay anchored. I found it to be a roomy basin, shut in by a rock-bound shore. In places, the water slept beneath black and glassy surfaces. In others, all was movement and commotion. Its waves came boiling and bubbling against the launch, with swirling masses of white sand, shifting hither and thither as if condemned to perpetual unrest. The fact that my men, while fishing in different parts of the bay, often caught deep-sea fish, proved to me that Port No Man's Port was traversed by a channel from 4 to 6 fathoms in depth. The only difficulty would be to fix the boundaries of this constantly shifting path long enough to sail across the basin. I next turned my attention to the whirlpool. It marked the junction of the outer channel with the basin of Port No Man's Port. Having purchased a number of condemned hulks for the purpose of testing the strength and fury of the whirlpool, I caused a strong hawser to be rigged to a capstan on shore, and was in this way enabled to let the launch approach within a ship's length of the whirlpool within perfect safety. In truth, it was, when roused to the full measure of its fury by the intrusion of any large floating body, a sight to strike terror to the stoutest heart. With a deep booming and a rumble, its waters rose in tumultuous commotion, boiling, bubbling, seething, till snow-white foam covered the pool like a mantle of bleached linen. Then lifting the intruder, which in this case was one of the hulks that I had ordered to be launched upon them, these angered waters whirled it completely around. In an instant, as if exhausted by this tremendous effort, a mysterious calm sank on the pool. The foam sheet, broken in shreds, danced gently on the rippling bosom of the water. All was peace, save that hulk still lay trembling like an affrighted being in the lap of this resting monster. For look, it is aroused again. Faster and faster it whirls its prey. Deeper and deeper its now wide open jaws draw down the ill-fated hulk. A terrible roar tells me the end is near. 'Tis gone. Ay, but wait, it will give up its prey again. Even now bits of plank floated seaward, dancing on the rushing waters. Soon the crumpled, broken, crushed remnants of that strong hulk will follow. This watery monster doth not feed upon what he swallows. He destroys for the mere love of destruction. Night had come now, and I returned to my ship. The shifting sands and the whirlpool had uncovered their horrors, but I feared them no more. Like the horse tamer, when he was at last succeeding in thrusting the steel bit between the champing and gnashing teeth of a wild young steed, I now felt that they were conquered. And now for Thor's hammer, was my cry, as I sat down beside Bulger for a brief moment's reflection. The first streak of gray light in the east found me on the deck. Thor's hammer was a huge shaft of black flinty rock, projecting about 20 feet out of the water and ending in a hammer-shaped head. It guarded the channel where it reached the sea, standing exactly in the middle, thus forcing a vessel to pass on one side or another of it. Beneath the waters, this dread sentinel must have ended in a gigantic ball, which, in the flight of time, had worn a socket for itself in the bedrock of the channel, for it swung loose and free, moved by every powerful billow from side to side, threatening swift destruction to any passing craft. To speak frankly, the sight of this terrible engine of destruction appalled me. How shall I escape the vigilance of this gigantic sentinel, who knows no sleep, no rest, whose blows fall with like fury on friend or foe. How shall I lull him to repose for a brief few moments? Determined to study closely the strength, the rapidity, and the character of the blows struck by Thor's hammer, I caused several huge structures of plank and timber to be erected near the position of this mighty sentinel of rock. One after the other, I ordered them to be thrown into the channel. At first, I was fairly paralyzed upon discovering that even the slight vortex caused by the drifting by of one of these wooden structures set the swinging rock in violent vibration, always towards the passing object. Judging from the effect of Thor's hammer upon these floating masses of plank and timber, a single blow would suffice to crush the very life out of my ship in spite of her unusual staunchness. I stood transfixed with dread foreboding. I could feel the beads of perspiration break from my forehead and trickle down my cheeks. Must I give up and return home broken in spirits, humiliated, the butt of ridicule, the target of the village wit, the subject of mirth and laughter in every peasant's cottage? Oh no, it must not be. Like a flash of lightning, a thought flamed across the dark horizon of my mind. Am I not dreaming? Was it really so? One of the wooden structures still remained. Controlling my emotion with great difficulty, I ordered it thrown into the channel, and took up a favorable position to watch once again the wrath of the towering sentinel. In a few moments Thor's hammer felt the coming of the craft, and bent itself in impotent rage, beating the air with blows which fell faster and faster. I was right. Once Thor's hammer had begun its labor of death and ruin, it turned not from its task, so long as there remained any object for it to spend its fury upon. Nor was there any escape for the ill-fated craft until it had been pounded into flinders. Hanging over it, blow followed blow with fearful clash and clamor. Not until the poor remnant had drifted seaward did that black and flinty shaft cease its furious swinging. Turning to my sailing master, who stood with his wondering eyes fixed full upon me, I called out in a calm and careless tone, "In 3 days, skipper, if the weather is clear, we leave Port No Man's Port." A lump rose up in his throat, but he gulped it down and cried out merrily, "Aye, aye, sir." And what 3 busy days they were, too. My men were not long in catching something of the indomitable spirit of their new commander. I worked them hard, but I fed them well, served out grog with a liberal but wise hand, and saw that all their wants were satisfied. In turn, their wonderment became admiration, and their admiration affection. The first day all hands that could be spared were set to work to make fishing lines, with a good stout hook at one end and a cork float on the other. The lines were cut about 3 fathoms in length, and the floats were painted a bright crimson. I then gave orders to rig 3 jury-masts, one midships and one fore and aft. My men set to work with a will, but I caught them several times in the act of tapping their foreheads and exchanging significant glances. But if this last order threw them into a brown study, my next had the effect of a bombshell exploding in their midst. Sailing master and all, they stood staring at me as if they were only waiting for me to annihilate them. My order was to rig a steering gear under the figurehead. A coasting vessel which I had sent for now came sailing leisurely into Port No Man's Port. I directed the skipper to pay her crew 3 months' extra wages and discharge them. This done, my men were ordered to lash the coaster on our starboard side. I verily believe that my whole plan, so carefully studied out, was at this point only saved from utter failure by the wisdom of my faithful Bulger. The coaster had no sooner been lashed to our side than he sprang lightly over the railing and began to amuse himself by gambolling up and down the clear deck. Suddenly he paused near one of the hatches and broke out into the most furious barking. I called to one of my officers to look sharp and see what the matter was. He reported in a few moments that one of the discharged seamen had been found concealed in the hold. When I threatened to put him in irons, he confessed that his design had been to cut the coaster loose as soon as our ship had drawn near the whirlpool. It was a narrow escape. Dear faithful Bulger, how much we owe thee for that discovery. The third day dawned bright and fair. The wind was most favorable, blowing strong off the shore. At the first glimmer of light, my men were astir and on the lookout for my appearance. They greeted Bulger and me with 3 hearty cheers. They had made up their minds that what I didn't know Bulger did, and at last all was ready. I nodded to the sailing master, and in a moment or so the capstream began to revolve, and the merry "Yo, heave ho" of the men told me that the anchor had been started. Hundreds of lines and floats well baited were now cast overboard. Standing on the taffrail, glass in hand, I watched them closely and anxiously. Imagine my joy at seeing several of these crimson floats disappear like a flash, rise again, and vanish for an instant. "The first point is gained," I cried out. "I have found the channel." Passing word quickly to the sailing master, who was in charge of the steering gear, my good vessel moved slowly out of Port No Man's Port stern first. Again and again the baited lines with their crimson floats were thrown overboard. The deep water fish that swarmed the ever-shifting channel kept steadily at work. As our ship advanced, they tugged at the lines and thus kept the tortuous course plainly marked out for us. Glass in hand, I watched the successful working of this part of my plan with tingling veins and a bounding heart. A loud huzzah from my men tell me that we have cleared the shifting sands. Aye, true it is, we have crossed the basin of Port No Man's Port. Its dreaded quicksands swirl and roll in vain. It was not fated that they should engulf the little barren ship. I think that's a good point to stop. Let's see, I'm going to mark it here. There we go. And that is all for now, my dear friends. Thank you so much for joining us. Never forget that you are amazing. You are loved. Be well, be safe out there, and I'll see you on the next show. Bye.